Welcome to Slammed, a Boston Celtics podcast discussing the Boston Celtics and the NBA at large. This is a trade deadline special. I'm Meghan Ottolini from WEI, joined by Esteban Bustillos from GBH, our intrepid producer, Justin Turpin. He's actually boots on the ground right now. The word is that Joe Mazzulla is holding a very special media session today after Brad Stevens kind of at large post trade deadline press conference. So Justin is doing good work out there. We can't wait to hear or get whisperings of, depending on how open that media session with Joe Mazzulla is. But that's where he is today. And Esteban and I were just chatting. It is a Friday. So if you're watching in the video medium, I'm fully embracing the impending Super Bowl weekend, not with my gear, but just with the fact that I haven't gotten ready for the day yet.
Hey,
So I
it's
got
all
my
good.
O's hat on, I got my main sweatshirt going. I'm repping all parts of the East Coast.
Yeah. It's good. I'm in a hoodie, a gray t-shirt. It's gray outside. It's all good,
Yeah, but it's supposed to be like 60 degrees in Boston tomorrow.
Yeah, but then it's like it snows next week, which is just I think the perfect Boston experience of like, oh, like here's some warmth, here's some hope, and just snatch it right away. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're getting the whole spectrum.
As long as I'm not shoveling my car out, I don't care. Honestly,
Yeah,
the
that's
weather
true.
can do whatever.
That's
But
true.
going to the Celtics. So this trade deadline overall, without jumping the gun, like for the entire league, I thought was pretty lame. On the radio show yesterday, I gave it a C minus. And I don't know that I
Yeah,
expected like a complete blockbuster trade from anybody, but I think for the Celtics, they kind of did what I expected them to do. I thought that they would use more of the trade exception, but I just expected that it would be mostly deep down the bench depth, and that's you can pretty much take away that that's what they did. That's what Brad Stevens did. He gets Xavier Tillman from Memphis, obviously a big sturdy defender,
yeah,
plays forward and center, younger guy. And then they get somebody interesting in Jaden Springer from the Sixers, who had a very curious trade deadline with
yeah,
what
yeah,
they
yeah.
did in the East without jumping the gun again. Springer looks like a piece maybe more for development, especially if you follow some of the comments that Brad Stevens just made about, hey, he's younger than some of the guys that are going to
Right.
be in the draft this year. So I guess my big takeaways is this is tweaking on the margins. I didn't want them to move anyone from kind of the top 7 rotation. I didn't think
Right.
that made sense for what they get back. So it's pretty much what I expected from the Celtics. Do you have a different read of how they operated?
I think they did get better again, just marginally. Xavier Tillman may be a guy who comes in and takes like some of the minutes that maybe Nemias Queta is playing right now, but that's like sort of what it takes to win is those marginal gains. And he's not, at least in Memphis, he wasn't that great of a scorer, but all the reviews, he's a great defender. Jay King of The Athletic tweeted out, he ranks in the 99th percentile of all defenders by estimated plus minus. And we're gonna get into this quote later, but his versatility, his ability to switch, that's really good. And I mean, I was really shocked because I'm not a Memphis expert. I recognized his name and the fact really just 2 second round picks and Lamar Stevens to Memphis essentially. That was a kind of a steal for someone who is a pretty big rotational player down in Memphis.
Yeah, but I think being a rotational player down in Memphis is a little different than being a rotational player here in Boston just at this point, right?
Right.
Especially
Yeah.
with the injuries and the situation in Ja Morant down in Memphis. There's
Yeah.
unfortunately a few more rotational spots than there maybe would be. I'm not trying to like say I agree with you. I think it's a good value for the trade.
Yeah.
It's just I know that well ahead of time, weeks ahead of time, like we talked about the possibility of Kelly Olynyk's return and said that would be really hard to
Yeah.
make fit because of his contract. He ends up going to Toronto as a native Canadian. I think that
Yeah.
was them more doing a solid for him than
They
like
really
a
like getting
basketball
Canadians.
functional trade.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, but there were whisperings out there about, oh, could you get a Sadiq Bey who looked great
Yeah.
the other night when you saw him? Whisperings about, oh, would they go get Andre Drummond? And so again, I would have been surprised by a move that big, especially when you
Yeah.
start seeing things ahead of the trade deadline where they're talking about how good the chemistry is in the locker room and all of that. I think it was kind of like the writing was on the wall that this was going to be deep bench moves. Here's what Joe Mazzulla had to say about the addition of Tillman.
Can I ask you about Xavier Tillman now?
Yeah.
It's after 6:45.
Yeah.
What do you think he brings to this team?
Skilled, toughness, well coached. Obviously we paid a lot of attention to him. Just because of the team that he plays for and the coach that he has, and I think his defensive versatility. He has numbers. He has really good numbers against some of the top centers in the league. And his pick and roll defense and rim protection is pretty good. So I think just gives us versatility at that position.
And he also can switch. Like, he can handle a lot of switches. He can be on high pick and roll. Like, how important is it that he's not only a tough, he's undersized center, but he can handle the different roles you put your centers in?
It's important for our bigs to be versatile. They have to be able to, and I think that's where KP has grown kind of in our system, and I think where Al and Luke are the foundation tools to our defense is they have the ability to change matchups every possession. They have the ability to guard different guys. They can navigate off-ball communication. They can switch, and they can change their depth and pick and roll. So it's one of the most important positions in our defense is our bigs and their ability to be versatile. And so he's shown that, and we just got to continue to coach him on it and get him up to speed in our system. So I'm looking forward to it.
So one of the things that also immediately jumped out to me about this particular trade, because I think it's the more impactful for this team, is what you said, that he's not a big offensive production guy. And how does Mazzulla work that into whatever minutes he's going to play in Boston if he's not going to be part of a team that is still very offensively minded, even though they've certainly incorporated more defense compared to last year? They're by no means the 2022 Celtics with their focus on defense. Where do you see Joe Mazzulla fitting him into their plan?
Yeah, I mean, another thing I saw pointed out, and forgive me, I forget who tweeted this, but this idea that uh, you know, he was bad in Memphis with a team with, that had been really weird. John Morant's legal issues and then his injury. So points weren't necessarily easy to come by, especially in his position. But with better talent around him, all these shooters, what I'd be fascinated to see what they could do with him and pick and roll action, be able to grab rebounds, etc. And again, I don't necessarily think he's going to be coming in and be like, you're going to get big minutes, but it's sort of like, can you play him? Maybe get some minutes that just when Porzingis is out, or maybe when Cornette or Horford maybe don't have all the gas in their tank. Again, just to, if you can just win those minutes, that's a huge edge. And I think, like we said earlier, beyond just the offensive side, his ability to just go and switch, like Mazzulla said, to multiple positions. I think he's only 6'8", so a little undersized as a 4 or 5. But again, just that ability to go and be across the floor, that's important. And I think what we'll probably see is more on the defense. And again, with a better team around him, I think he'll be able to get some more open looks.
Yeah, a lot of people are calling it big insurance, and I've seen some comparisons to the Mike Muscala trade that was made last year, and that really had pretty much zero impact in the playoffs. But it's a different calculation to me when you have Kristaps Porzingis on your roster, and even
Yeah.
though he is playing extremely younger than his age, you have Al Horford. We've talked about this a lot. Like, the idea of big insurance, I'm not sure that it's something that you'll see so much in the playoffs as when you're getting into this stretch of March and April, and you're trying to figure out that balance for someone like Porzingis of how much are you conditioning him and getting him used to these minutes in games versus maybe giving him more rest than you even have Rob Williams in the past ahead of the playoffs, that balance. And this just gives you another option outside of Cornet and Keita, who I think Brad in his availability just said that they're still waiting to see if he's going to kind of be promoted off of that two-way contract. I kind of feel like he's earned that, but
he kind of already is.
Yeah,
it's like I think we talked about this before. I think he's played one game in Maine.
Yeah, it's like the guy who doesn't know his way around Portland, let's just bring him down to Boston. It's I don't know. Whatever the financials around that. There's it's just he's established residency, okay? He's probably got some place in Weston or something. Anything else you want to say on Jaden Springer? I know you had this note in from Taylor Snow with the Celtics.
Yeah, just the I think the Celtics really sort of, it seems, we're focusing on defense. Taylor Snow tweeted out, in Springer's final game with Philly, he was guarding his primary task was guarding Steph Curry, held him to 5 points when he was guarding him, just one field goal on 34.2 possessions. I think who knows, again, a guy who's really young still, but I've seen a couple different highlights mixes of just his defense as a guard, which you don't really see that a lot. Of people making those and posting those on Twitter or X. That's exciting. And the fact that I'm not sure what Brad Stevens has on Philly, the fact that they gave their main rival a young guard, a young defensive guard with a lot of upside and potential, for not a lot in return for a second round pick. Either he has something on them or he's some sort of magician. That's again what felt like another steal on Stevens' part.
So you mentioned the Sixers, who had just a strange trade deadline, deciding to deal pretty directly to their competitors as Embiid is undergoing this unfortunate meniscus surgery and can have recovery from that. I'm not trying to read too deeply into it, but I'm like, is that any kind of white flag that they're waving? Maybe they just don't care about these pieces, but you don't usually see a team dealing so directly.
I mean, we'll get into this, but the Pat Bev trade to one of the other, your other main competitor outside of the Knicks, to the Bucks. That's it's bizarre, and I'm sure this wouldn't be happening with Embiid if he was healthy. But it's not the best look, especially when the team is just struggling overall right now.
Let's talk about the rest of the East and what they did, because you brought up one of the biggest trades, which is the Pat Beverley trade to the Bucks. You put in this amazing, I had forgotten about this, clip from last year with Damian Lillard when he was with the Blazers, getting into it with Pat Bev, and now they're going to be teammates there. Does this move the needle for you on how you feel about the Bucks in what has been a tumultuous season for them?
I think I was looking this up. They lost last night to the Timberwolves. I know it was by double digits. I forget the exact score. So it adds much needed defensive capability, which has been sort of the knock on them this whole season.
They lost, they lost 129-105.
129-105.
That's pretty brutal.
not great, especially as great as Damian Lillard is, like, the one knock against him is his defense. So having a guard, especially who is known almost exclusively for his defense, it will help. But across the East as a whole, I didn't see anything where I was like, oh, these people have caught up to where Boston is through trades. I will say the one that caught my attention the most was the Knicks deal with Detroit, getting Alec Burks, Bojan Bogdanovic. Bogdanovic is really good. I don't think that necessarily catches them up to what the Celtics are doing, but it makes a team that we've already talked about is already really good. It makes them really, really dangerous. I know it's sort of them in Cleveland going back and forth for that 2 spot. That's gonna be a really fascinating race to see who's number 2, and maybe they catch up to Boston, but just presuming that things stay the way they are, that Cleveland New York race for number 2 in Milwaukee that's gonna be a lot of fun, especially because Bogdanovich, I'm really fascinated to see how he'll do in New York.
Me too. I look at New York and they remind me a lot less talented, I think, but they do remind me a lot of the Celtics from 2 years ago in picking up a lot of this momentum as they go into the second half of the season. We're not at All-Star break yet, but for just basically the calendar year in January, having a couple of these trades and really picking up steam and having this really, really strong defensive identity that they've kind of exploded with. OG's missed a couple games, but I think he's a big piece of that. And
Yeah.
so I think that they're one that we're certainly going to continue watching. Does any of these trades, I guess, including or starting with that Knicks one, does it change how you see the landscape of the East, where we went into the season certainly saying, most of us saying, it's the Celtics, it's the Bucks,
Right.
it's one of those two, depending on who you think won those offseason trades. Now, as you look at it, who I still have the Celtics at the top. I think that's pretty clear. Who do you have just beneath them as a challenger?
Since in our last episode we talked about how well the Knicks are doing. Since then, the Cavs have sort of leapfrogged them, and I know again the Knicks are dealing with some injuries. I really do like the way the Cavs are looking right now. I mean, Donovan Mitchell producing an All-Star season. That team as a whole just seems to gel. And as I mentioned too, while that is really fascinating to watch, and I'm really glad that Mitchell is getting sort of his due. This Knicks team is again very similar, a team that has gelled. They all seem to like each other, and they're really like they have that whole city buzzing. So again, I don't necessarily see it changing that landscape per se, but it does make it more. It does make it, at least with like the Knicks trade. I do think that makes them a more dangerous team, not just to the Celtics but to everyone else. So I wouldn't say this is going to put them over the top, but it does make it. I would be like, hey, like this team was already good. You be a little bit more worried because they got some really good pieces out of this.
Do you want to talk about Gordon Hayward and Grant? Like I kind of have moved on from them. Just guys who are moving around the league. Gordon Hayward to OKC. A couple people I talked to were excited about that from the perspective of OKC so good and they want the best for Gordon after the way things went here. Grant is that was a quick trip with Dallas. So best of luck to him in Charlotte.
Best of luck. I will say the Gordon Hayward trade, out of all the trades, I think may have fascinated me the most across the landscape. He's probably the only guy in OKC who remembers the 90s now, but also a guy who's been sort of lost in the wilderness in Charlotte.
Yeah.
A solid guy, still solid player. At 33, I think is old by NBA standards.
That's wild. Gordon Hayward's 33.
Yeah.
Time comes for all of us.
It does. But now on a team where his talents will be used in a much more effective way, where he's not like the star and he is a star, and that somehow I think can make him much more dangerous because everybody's like, oh, we gotta stop SGA, we gotta stop Chet, we gotta stop all these other guys, and now they have Hayward who maybe coming off the bench getting some key minutes. Just the knowledge of being in the playoffs, that's I think gonna pay big dividends for OKC.
And he's not gonna have any access to the aux cord. Those guys are going to be like, you are not coming in here.
Almost certainly.
Some 1998 Jay-Z in the locker room.
Yeah, almost certainly.
No. Let's move on to Take Flight because a lot of other stuff going on with All-Star break coming up. A lot of fun stuff to dive into. Let's start with a topic that will not go away because Derrick White snubbed. How many times can you be snubbed? I guess, so he's snubbed for the All-Star reserves, which I think we agreed that we saw that coming. He and Porzingis, though, both snubbed as alternates for when Julius Randle and who is the other?
Embiid.
and Embiid, of course,
Right.
who cannot participate in the All-Star game. And instead there's Trae Young and Scotty Barnes. So do you feel like that was the right call? I would say just from the jump, I think Trae Young is a little bit more obvious.
Yeah.
Not a great Hawks team, but his numbers certainly catapult him into the category where I think he can be considered. And
Yeah.
he's a big enough star. I know that shouldn't really matter, but it's All-Star weekend. So
It does.
he's a bigger star than Derrick
Yeah.
White.
Yeah. Looking at my sort of personal list, Trae Young was always like sort of the question, the mystery box for me.
He's such a polarizing guy.
Yeah.
And in terms of his role with that team.
Yeah, his numbers this year, he's shooting 20. He's averaging 27 points on 43% shooting from the field. That's pretty that's pretty standard. It's like, oh, like that guy's an all-star. I do sort of wonder how much you have to consider winning in this sort of calculation as an individual player. I don't know how much you can say like, oh, the wins and losses are just on him. Again, a team that isn't great as a whole. So I think for the most part, every other All-Star on the East, at least, is playing on a team that is winning, that is in a playoff contention where the Hawks are not. So all that being said, it makes sense. I will say, the Derrick White conversation has always been, to me, I think it should have been a Kristaps Porzingis conversation, because I thought he was going to be, if there was going to be a third All-Star on the Celtics, I thought it should have been him. So him and Scotty Barnes, I think that was a bit more of a toss-up. So I understand why they went with Scotty, a younger name, on the rise, a guy who is a face of that franchise. So that was sort of where the split was for me, is if he's going to replace somebody, if somebody's going to replace somebody else as a reserve, I thought it would have been Porzingis. I don't know. How did you feel?
Porzingis has better numbers when you look at it, but the number that hurts them is just 37 games. His availability, it makes sense strategically for what the Celtics are trying to do this year, but I don't think it garners you all-star attention. And I think that's fair. If that's the role on the team that you have to be kind of delicately handled, you look at what the trade-off for something like that is. You look at why Embiid can't participate in All-Star weekend. I'm not saying that, Porzingis can't still get injured in any game that he does play in, or one way and one way is the tougher way. I just think that when it comes to All-Star honors, especially in a league where the commissioner is trying to make an effort to give incentive to playing more nights and making sure that the stars are out there when people are buying tickets for the games,
right?
It makes sense to me that Porzingis wouldn't be in the mix.
Yeah, and I will say, I think my thought process was Porzingis. Again, I think everybody,
is Porzingis a better player? Yeah. I'd take Porzingis on my team over both those guys if I'm building a team any night. But at the same time, the league runs All-Star and for the reserves. That's who's making the decisions.
Yeah, I think my thought process was, as great as Derrick White has been playing this season, the person who has been the most transformative to what the team has been able to do, I think is very obvious, is Porzingis. So that was why I was like, oh, that should have been him. And I think Justin, who again is out on the field right now, had tweeted out, I was like, oh, like Adebayo over Porzingis was he disagreed with that, and I would have sided with Adebayo as well, just because of he was an All-Star last year. He's putting up similar numbers this year, and just what his role is on that team. But I think with both of them, it's just kind of like we've talked about this before too. When you have that much talent, you're just somebody's numbers have to get sacrificed, and
right.
And what would you rather be, an all-star or a winner? And I think they both rather be a team that's a 1 seed that has a very real shot at making a deep run into the playoffs, to the finals. So I think that's that's what they're that's what's more important. But quickly before we move on, we're on this Derrick White conversation. Can I tell you my my girlfriend's Katie, who love with the rage of 1,000 stars, she has been begging me to mention her on the podcast for weeks
Okay.
now.
Shout
And
out Katie.
shout out Katie. So she has nicknamed Derrick White Pippin from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I thought this was a Scotty thing.
Not Scotty, the other Pippin.
Okay.
Because she looked at him during one game, she's like, he looks like a hobbit just running out there. And I was like, that's kind of rude.
You're like, that's mean.
Yeah. And then the other night, just looked up, he had hit a 3 or something against the Hawks, and he looks up and he's like, Pippin scores again. So you know what? Shout out Katie with the original Lord of the Rings reference there.
Are you like a Lord of the Rings head? I'm not really into the fantasy stuff besides Harry Potter because I'm a millennial. We're my fiance and I are rewatching Game of Thrones right now, which was kind of like an accidental rewatch, and now we're like, well,
that's the best
started
kind.
Season 2. We gotta keep it going.
No, I'm deep into Lord of the Rings. Big fan. Yeah, I saw when the you did the character comparison for all of the Game of Thrones guys to the Patriots.
Trying to figure out who the next head coach is going to be. My God, Bob Kraft out there doing stuff in Vegas. I don't know.
We're big fans over here, and she's a specifically big fan of Aragorn, unfortunately. Anyways, that's a different conversation. On to the next hot take flight.
All right, hot take flight. Jaylen Brown. Okay, this I love. I love. Let's just get right to it. Jaylen Brown is participating in the AllStar dunk contest. Let's hear from Jason Tatum, and then we'll get into why this is a surprisingly divisive topic in Boston locally.
Jason, are you going to help Jaylen in the dunk contest? Are you going to stand under the rim, or are you going to give him tips? What's the process been like now that he apparently or almost officially is entering? What's your reaction to that?
I mean, if he asked me, I would be open to it. Like I said, I don't know officially if he's announced that he's in, but I think it would be great for him to participate in it, right? Kind of bring back that star power to the dunk contest that, we want to see all the big name guys be in it. That's how I grew up watching it. So, I would love for him to be in it, and I would love for him to win, and I think it would be exciting to see.
So I'll just say from the jump, I think Jaylen participating in the dunk contest is one of the best things. This sounds outrageous, but one of the best things he's done in his career so far. Wow. He is on paper, the highest paid player in the league.
Yeah.
Which happens whenever someone signs a super max, but he holds the belt right now. He's super high up in the NBA PA. He's been a vice president. He's held leadership there for the last 5 years. I think this is such a good example because the dunk contest has sucked for at least 8 years. You can go back to the Zach LaVine back-to-back years, which people like to point to and go like, oh, well, in 2016, the dunk contest was still a thing. And it's like, but it wasn't really, because Zach LaVine wasn't Zach LaVine at that time. He was just this very young guy.
Yeah.
And so I think it is a really good example that Jaylen is setting as somebody who is that type of player. He's a physical guy. He's a legitimate dunker in games. And so instead of going to the 3-point contest like everybody else does, he's like, all right, I'm going to take it back, kick it kind of retro. I think it's great.
Yeah. Just quickly, the other 3 contestants, Mac McClung, Jaime Jaquez from the Heat, and Jacob Toppin, they're going to be the other participants. So I guess, is it fair to say Brown is the best in-game dunker that the Celtics have in terms of smoothness, athleticism, wow factor?
Yeah. And he's I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think he probably dunks the most, right?
Yeah.
I was, Tatum gets highlights for his infractions he gets for hanging on the rim.
Yeah.
On the rim. But Jaylen, like, it's actually a part of his game Whereas when I think of anybody else, it's a once in a while type thing.
Yeah, and to your point too, it is really cool to see a legitimate star. I think he's the only all-star of the group who is participating in the dunk contest. You know, the sort of the white whale for the dunk contest that we may never see is like LeBron, right? Like I wish that would happen. It's like that's the one guy.
So
like,
annoying.
yeah, I don't think we've ever seen Giannis, right? He's never been in it as far as I remember. So like the guys who are like, oh, those are the best dunkers in the game, haven't traditionally done it. And you know, you go back, you think about, you know, when Jordan was doing it, and you know, just legendary moments. And so to have one of the top athletes, top players in the game doing it, yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. It's the last Celtic to win it, Gerald Green, back in 2007 in Vegas, and the only other guy, D Brown, for the Celtics in 1991. So if he wins, he would be only the third Celtic to ever win the dunk contest. And I think he has a good of a shot. I think the hard thing about the dunk contest, it's not just about how good of a dunker you are. You have to be creative.
Yeah.
Too. So I'm look, he went to Cal. He's a smart guy. He's a creative guy. I'm sure he'll have.
I'm sure he has a
something up his
whole
sleeve.
team on it, you know,
Yeah,
researching
100%.
what's out there. I say it was divisive because we had Brian Scalabrine on our radio show a couple of days ago before it had been announced, but I think it was Shams who had it out there who was saying that it was something that Jaylen was seriously considering. And Scal's take was, well, there is a risk there because it's a physical contest. And I just, like, all due respect to Scal, love you, Scal, but like, I just can't. I can't live in a world where we're disregarding the dunk contest because it's dangerous. You know, like, come on.
Yeah, I don't think has anybody ever gotten hurt doing I can't recall a situation where somebody got physically hurt from this.
I think there may have been one time. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me, but I don't think it would be anything serious. You think about things that have happened in the postseason. Like there's a point where Tatum hit his hand against the back of a backboard trying to block a shot. We all know that Jaylen hurt his hand last year in the first round watering his plants.
Yeah. Yeah.
So look, like, as long as he's not gardening, I think he can participate in the dunk contest.
That should be the dunk. He puts like a pot on the back of the back iron, and he gets like a water thing, and then he dunks it, and then waters it at the same time. There we go. There's the dunk right there.
I like it. Or maybe he like hangs up some vines or something.
Oh yeah, I like it. What is you mentioned in recent years the dunk contest hasn't been what it has been in the past. What is sort of your favorite dunk contest memory?
So I always think I'm probably just because of the age that I am and the age that it was when this happened was Vince Carter.
Oh yeah.
And I think 2000. Like when I think the dunk contest, of course you think of the old images, old to us, of Jordan. But like when I think about what I remember, the first big one I remember was Vince Carter. And then I feel like
arm through the rim.
Yeah. And then I feel like the last one, and I've written about this before for WEI, the last one that I really feel like generated serious headlines was the ridiculous Blake Griffin Kia dunk in 2011.
That's what I was gonna say.
Where I'm like, we're not above gimmicks, you know? It's a dunk contest. We can do props. We can bring in crazy stuff.
It has to be like a good gimmick because Blake Griffin, it was so good because it wasn't just the car. It was that Baron Davis was lobbing it to him through the sunroof. And then he also brought out the choir who was
I was gonna say
that was great. It's great theatrics.
Make it a production.
Yeah, but make it a production, but make it cool, make it funny. And Blake Griffin was he's all of those things. So that was great. The other one I was gonna say that came to mind recently that I really liked was when Nate Robinson dunked over Dwight Howard. And if you remember, Dwight Howard had the whole Superman thing, and he had won the year before, I believe. And Nate Robinson came out. He was with the Knicks at the time. Came out in the all green Knicks uniform, the green Nike foams, and his moniker was Crypto Nate, and he dunked over Howard, stuff like that. That's wonderful.
This is what we got to bring back. We
Yeah.
need some theatrics. Yeah. I don't know if Jaylen will bring that, but I'm really excited that he's participating.
And I will last thing before we go on, I will say we are kind of in what may be a golden era of Mexican NBA players. Speaking as as a Mexican American myself, we got Devin Booker, who's Mexican on, I believe, on his mom's side. Wandescano Anderson won a championship, was the first Mexican player to win a championship with the Warriors. Now we got a Mexican in the dunk contest in Jaime Jaquez. This is incredible stuff. Theos and Theas everywhere are off the walls. shout out Jaime Jaquez doing like a sleeping, like this guy may be like a third place rookie of the year sort of
yeah
dude,
I liked him in the draft.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody did, but
yeah,
I think everyone thought in the draft that was a perfect fit for him.
Yeah, so shout out Jaime. There's a Jaquez in the dunk contest. Who would have thought?
Would you like him to bring any particular theatrics?
I don't know. I think I don't know if anything theatric wise. I'm just excited to see what he does. And Mac McClung he was pretty exciting last year too. So I think it's going to be a really fun dunk contest overall.
Yeah, looking forward to it. But there is another kind of big thing happening in the sports world on Sunday. I mean, also big in our region because the Patriots are diving into a complete rebuild. But Super Bowl Sunday, do you have any radical predictions? I'll throw mine right out there. I'm done betting against Patrick Mahomes. I think that the Niners are the better team. I think that Kansas City, this is one of these iterations where it's going to be more about the defense. But at the end of the day, I just don't think it's going to be Brock Purdy hoisting that trophy instead of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to pick against. I also sort of think that San Francisco is the better team, and so look. I'm a Cowboys fan. It's hard for me to say. I lean San Francisco just because, as a whole, I think there's it's just a little more solid, but when you have like a generational guy like Mahomes, it's hard to pick against. I mentioned this in the document. Who do you think would be the best basketball player? I think Mahomes had a quote in a Sports Center feature a little while ago. Like, in a different life, maybe I've been basketball guy. Travis Kelce seems like a basketball guy. Who could you see?
Yeah,
having
I remember.
An NBA career?
So I Jason Kelce, my fiance actually told me this because he's a big Jason Kelce fan.
Yeah.
And not as much Travis Kelce. And he said that Travis grew up as a basketball player, whereas Jason grew up, I think, as a hockey player, as their kind of secondary sports, which says something. So maybe I'd go with Travis Kelce. He certainly has the size. Anybody else in particular? Like, I'm sure that there's guys out there who were dual sport athletes who there must be somebody in the league who got, a college scout interested just because of the athleticism and
I don't know. I would love to see though, like Andy Reid get like just someone to give him like a 10-day coaching contract. I don't know if that's a thing. Let him coach the Bucks. Let's see what happens. Who knows? I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see it. What is your go-to Super Bowl snack?
So it's funny because we had wings in the studio yesterday, which were great. Shout out Star Market. But I am much more a nachos girl. Like out of all the Super Bowl snacks, nachos are king. Nachos over everything. Put whatever you want on the nachos. Any meat, no meat, just piles of melted cheese, and I'm there. I think that's without a doubt. I do not touch the veggie platter. Like, don't even put it in front of me. It's offensive to me. No,
not a thing. Not a thing. I am going for I do pigs in a blanket every year. That's a favorite. I'm also gonna do like some roast beef tacos. We're gonna try that. We'll see how that works. And then I'm also making cheesecake. It's gonna be a good day.
Cheesecake.
Yeah,
That's impressive.
Yeah. Well, shout out to my our good friend, me and my girlfriend's good friend Maya, just got accepted into Harvard grad school. So that we're gonna be celebrating that a little bit on Sunday as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Last thing, Usher halftime show.
Yeah.
We are both of the age where we remember the heyday of Usher, Confessions era. Where do you think this will rank on Super Bowl halftime list all time?
I have really high expectations.
Yeah.
Confessions Part 2 is
Oh, yeah.
one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly underrated song. I think also like people forget or they sleep on early Usher. Like late
Yeah.
90s, circa 2000, 2001 Usher with My Way. Like there's some deep cuts in there that
Yeah.
are like you'll hear them and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, this is a forgotten memory." I
Yeah,
think
You
for a lot
Remind
of
Me.
people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's we were talking about on the radio show what our favorite shows were, and they did such an excellent job a couple years ago with Dre and Snoop and Eminem and Kendrick.
Yeah.
And so I'm really looking forward to this one. I hope that there's a couple surprise guests. So I'm hoping it's like top 10, top 12 material.
I think it's always hard for me to put anything above Prince in Miami raining, singing Purple Rain. But yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun.
All right, we've run out of time here. So hopefully we get some incredibly juicy information from Justin because we missed him today.
Yeah.
But thank you for tuning in. You can catch us here or wherever you get your podcasts, and enjoy your Super Bowl weekend. Have a safe and stuffed, delicious Sunday.